Thank you for joining us today to share your remarkable near-death experience. Can you start by telling us about your background and beliefs before this event occurred? Certainly. Before my near-death experience, I was a staunch materialist. I was a college professor, department head, and considered myself an intellectual. My faith was in materialism. I believed that if you couldn't measure, see, weigh, or count something, it simply didn't exist. This was the prevailing view among my academic colleagues as well. The idea of anything spiritual or supernatural seemed absurd to me at the time. So you had no religious or spiritual inclinations at all? None whatsoever. In fact, I was quite hostile to religion. I saw it as a crutch for weak-minded people. I prided myself on being rational and scientific in my worldview. The last thing I would have ever done was pray or turn to God for help. Can you tell us about the health crisis that led to your near-death experience? It happened while I was on a trip to Paris with a group of students. I suddenly experienced excruciating abdominal pain and was rushed to the hospital. The doctors determined I had a perforation in my duodenum that was leaking stomach acid and other digestive juices. Essentially, I was digesting myself from the inside. The pain was unimaginable, like having a hot coal burning inside my gut. That sounds horrific. What happened next at the hospital? I saw 2 doctors in the emergency room, but they didn't do much besides send me to surgery. They told me I only had about an hour to live and needed immediate surgery. But when I got to the surgical ward, there was no surgeon available. For 10 agonizing hours, I received no pain medication or treatment whatsoever. I was in absolute agony the entire time. You were in that much pain for 10 hours with no relief? That's hard to fathom. It was torture. I begged for morphine or anything to ease the pain, but nothing was given. Later, people tried to explain my experience as a hallucination caused by pain medications, but the reality is I wasn't given any drugs at all. I was fully conscious and lucid, just in indescribable pain. At what point did you realize your situation was dire? When the nurse came in and said they still couldn't locate a surgeon, I knew I was in serious trouble. I told my wife to tell my parents that I loved them, and I said goodbye to my children. My wife was sobbing uncontrollably like I'd never seen before. She was crying from the soles of her feet, shaking and throbbing with grief. I looked at her and said, "It's time for me to go." What happened next? Is this when your near-death experience began? Yes. I had been struggling to breathe for hours, and I realized that all I had to do was stop trying. So I let go and allowed myself to slip into unconsciousness. The next thing I knew, I was standing up, feeling more alive and real than I ever had before. I felt completely healed and whole. Can you describe what you experienced in those first moments? The first thing I did was a reality check. I felt myself from head to toe and everything seemed solid and real, in fact, more real than normal. Then I started doing sensory checks. I could hear the fluorescent lights humming loudly. My vision was expanded beyond the normal 180 degrees. I had complete depth of field, able to focus on everything near and far simultaneously. My sense of touch was incredibly heightened. I could feel the texture of the linoleum through my feet. That's fascinating. What did you see around you? I was still in the hospital room. I saw my wife on the other side of the bed, and then I noticed a person in the bed mostly covered by a sheet. The uncovered head had a remarkable resemblance to me. This was very confusing, because rationally I knew it couldn't be me since I was standing there looking at it. How did you try to make sense of seeing your own body? My rational mind tried to come up with explanations. I thought maybe the hospital staff had made a wax replica of me for some reason, but I quickly realized how absurd that was. They wouldn't have had time, skill, or motive to do that. It was very disturbing and started to make me angry. What did you do next? I tried to communicate with my wife, but got no response. This infuriated me because in life, one of her ways of punishing me when we argued was to ignore me. So I thought she was mad at me for ruining her life by dying. I then tried talking to my roommate, a kind older Frenchman, but he looked right through me as if he couldn't see me. I started yelling and screaming at him with no response. I was becoming very agitated. It must have been incredibly frustrating to not be able to communicate. What happened then? I heard people in the hallway calling my name in English, which seemed odd since I was in France. They were saying, "Come with us." I went to the door and saw people in the hallway, but everything outside the room looked gray and fuzzy, like a bad black and white TV picture. This was strange because the room I was in was ultra clear. Who were these people calling you? They said they knew all about me and had been waiting for me. They urged me to hurry up and go with them. After some convincing, I became sure they were hospital staff coming to take me to surgery. Considering the poor treatment I'd received so far, it made sense they'd have me walk to surgery myself. So you went with them. Where did they take you? We went on a long journey. I don't know how to describe where we went exactly, but it became clear this wasn't a normal hospital. The surroundings became very bleak. There were no positive sensations, no birds, butterflies, flowers, sunshine, or any of the good things we take for granted. It was like a spiritual wasteland. That sounds ominous. What happened when you reached your destination? I realized I had entered a hellish realm. The beings there were cruel and vicious. Hundreds of them attacked me viciously, physically and emotionally tormenting me. The physical pain was awful, but the emotional anguish was even worse. I couldn't understand why they hated me so much or wanted to hurt me. That's horrifying. How long did this go on? It felt like an eternity, though I have no way to measure how long it actually was. They continued tormenting me until I was completely broken down, like roadkill. I was no longer physically or emotionally responsive. That's when everything changed. What happened to change the situation? In the depths of my despair, I heard a voice telling me to pray to God. At first, I resisted the idea. I didn't believe in God and had no idea how to pray. But the voice was insistent, telling me to pray to God. Finally, in desperation, I tried to remember prayers from childhood. What prayers did you attempt? I started with fragments I could remember, like, "The Lord is my shepherd," and "Our Father who art in heaven." I couldn't recall full verses, just phrases. But even these small attempts at prayer had a dramatic effect. How did the beings around you react to your prayers? They became furious. They screamed at me that there is no God, that nobody could hear me, and threatened to hurt me even worse for daring to pray. But I noticed that the more I prayed, the further away they retreated. Eventually, I could no longer hear them at all. That must have been a relief. What did you do once they were gone? I was alone, but still trapped. I couldn't move or leave wherever I was. I tried to make sense of my situation and came up with the idea that I had gone down the toilet into some kind of cosmic cesspool. I knew my life had been filled with emotional and spiritual garbage, so it made a weird kind of sense to me at the time. How did you feel about yourself at this point? I engaged in a brutal self-assessment. I graded myself on my relationships and behavior throughout my life, and gave myself mostly F's and D's across the board. I saw all the ways I had failed as a son, brother, husband, father, friend, and teacher. I realized I truly belonged in this awful place and that nothing would ever change. That sounds like a terribly dark moment. Did you see any way out? At first, I thought my only options were to somehow become more vicious than the beings who had tormented me in order to survive there, or to simply cease existing. I preferred non-existence to becoming like them. But then I remembered something from my childhood that changed everything. What childhood memory came to you? I had a flash of memory of being a young child in Sunday school, singing, "Jesus loves me." It wasn't so much the words, but the feeling of belief I had as a child, this idea of Jesus as a loving protector. Despite voices in my head telling me it was stupid and that Jesus would hate me for how I'd lived, I decided to call out to him. What exactly did you say? In utter desperation, I yelled out, "Jesus, please save me." I had no idea if there really was a Jesus or if he would want anything to do with me. It was a leap of blind faith in that moment. What happened after you called out to Jesus? Immediately, an incredibly bright light appeared. If it had been physical light, it would have been blindingly painful, but this was a spiritual light of indescribable beauty. Out of the light came hands and arms that reached for me. What happened when these arms reached you? 3 things happened simultaneously when Jesus touched me. First, all the wounds and gore on my spiritual body disappeared and I became whole. Second, the pain vanished and I was filled with ecstasy. And third, most importantly, I experienced a love beyond anything I had ever known or imagined could exist. Can you describe this love you felt? It's nearly impossible to put into words. It was all-encompassing, unconditional, and more powerful than anything in this world. I knew with absolute certainty that I was loved completely, that I was his favorite person in the whole universe. The amazing thing is, I realized he feels that way about everyone, each person is his favorite. What did Jesus do next? He picked me up and held me tight. I knew he not only loved me, but he genuinely liked me. He was happy to see me, not angry or disappointed. I clung to him, crying tears of joy while he gently rubbed my back. Then we began to move, almost like flying but without any physical sensation of wind or movement. Where were you going? We were moving towards what I can only describe as a world of light. I saw countless smaller lights moving in and out of this radiant realm. I suddenly realized we were approaching God's domain, heaven, if you will. And I panicked. Why did you panic? I thought Jesus had made a terrible mistake bringing me there. I was acutely aware of all the times I had denied God's existence, all my sins and failings. I was certain I didn't belong there and that I would be rejected. How did Jesus respond to your panic? We came to a stop just outside this realm of light. Jesus spoke to me telepathically for the first time, saying, "We don't make mistakes. You belong here." I was shocked that he could hear my thoughts. When I thought about how uncomfortable that made me, because of all the bad things I'd thought in my life, he just laughed. He found me genuinely funny and likable. What happened next? Jesus said he had some people he wanted me to meet. He made a musical tone, and a group of beings who I understood to be angels gathered around us. He explained that they had recorded my entire life and wanted to show it to me. Can you describe this life review process? It was like watching a holographic projection of my life, but we could enter into the scenes. We'd see my interactions with people, but then also see what happened to them afterwards or feel what they were feeling. It was incredibly immersive and emotionally intense. How did Jesus and the angels react to seeing your life? They were often disappointed, but never angry. They showed me how I had become increasingly manipulative and detached from people as I pursued my ambitions. I felt their sadness at the direction my life had taken. But the main lesson was that we are created to love one another. That's our primary purpose, and I had lost sight of that. How did you feel watching your life play out? It was brutal and humbling. All the things I had taken pride in, my career achievements, wealth, status, meant nothing to them. They cared about how I had treated people, especially those in need. I saw missed opportunities to show kindness or be a friend to someone who was hurting. I begged them to stop the review at points because it was so painful to watch. What was the main takeaway from this life review? The simple but profound truth that we are here to love each other. Everything else is secondary. I had completely missed the point of life, focusing instead on becoming famous, wealthy, and powerful. None of that mattered in the spiritual realm. After the life review, what happened? Jesus asked if I had any questions, and I had millions. I asked him everything I could think of, and he patiently answered it all. Some of his answers were quite surprising and even controversial. Can you give an example of something surprising Jesus told you? One example is what happens to babies who die very young or are aborted. Jesus showed me that they simply get another chance at life. This idea has made some people very angry when I've shared it, accusing me of heresy. But I can only relay what Jesus himself told and showed me. Did Jesus share any other surprising information? Yes, he showed me that the universe is full of intelligent life forms, and that Earth is actually one of the lower, less developed worlds. There are many more spiritually advanced and loving beings throughout creation than we realize. Did Jesus explain what typically happens when people die? He said that most people don't initially realize they've died. Often, the pain and suffering they experienced while dying suddenly stops, so they think they've recovered and gotten well. They don't understand they've passed over. It's ironic because so many people fear death, but the actual experience of dying is usually a relief. At this point, did you want to stay in the spiritual realm? Absolutely. I told Jesus I was ready to enter heaven and leave the physical world behind. But he had other plans. What did Jesus tell you? He said I needed to go back to Earth and live out the life I was created for in the first place. I argued with him quite forcefully about this. I didn't want to return to what I saw as a cruel world full of suffering. How did Jesus respond to your arguments? He acknowledged that there is cruelty and meanness in the world, but said there are also many loving and beautiful people. He told me, what's in your heart is what you'll find. If you have love in your heart, you'll see the love in others. If you have beauty in your heart, you'll see the beauty in them. He said that what we focus on internally shapes our external reality. How did you feel about having to return? I was very reluctant, but I trusted Jesus. And I have to say, he was absolutely right. In the 30+ years since my experience, I've found that when you seek love and beauty, you find it everywhere, even in people who might not seem loving or beautiful at first glance. Can you tell us about your initial recovery in the hospital after returning to your body? Yes, there was a particularly striking incident. I was in the recovery area, and the room was fairly dark even though it was daytime. Suddenly, the room lit up and a young man appeared. He looked to be in his early 20s, blonde, wearing pale green hospital scrubs. What did this young man say to you? He greeted me by name and said he was going to be watching over me. He told me everything would be okay, but that I had a long recovery ahead. He said he would always be around. When I asked for his name, he said not to worry about that, and that I'd never see him again. That seems contradictory. How did you respond? I was very confused. I pointed out that he had just said he'd always be around, but now he was saying I'd never see him again. He confirmed both statements were true, he would be with me always, but I wouldn't see him again. Then he said he had to go and left the room. What happened after the young man left the room? The room immediately went back to being dim. I was bewildered by the encounter. A nurse came in shortly after, and I asked her about the young doctor who had just been there. She insisted that no one had entered or left the room, and that she had been sitting at her desk right outside the door the whole time. We ended up having a bit of an argument because I was so certain about what I had seen and experienced. Looking back, how do you interpret that experience? I believe it was an angelic visitation. The being appeared as a young doctor to make me feel comfortable, but his knowledge and presence were clearly supernatural. It was a reassurance that I would be watched over during my recovery, even if I couldn't see my guardians. How did your near-death experience change your outlook on life? It completely transformed me. I went from being an atheistic materialist to having an unshakable faith in God and the spiritual realm. I realized that the purpose of life is to love one another and grow spiritually. All the things I had previously valued, career success, wealth, status, suddenly seemed trivial in comparison. How did this shift in perspective affect your relationships? It had a profound impact. I became much more compassionate and patient with others. I started to see the inherent worth in every person, regardless of their status or achievements. My relationships with my wife, children, and colleagues all improved dramatically as I focused on loving them rather than using them to boost my ego. Did you continue in your career as a professor? Initially, yes, but my approach to teaching changed significantly. I became much more focused on nurturing my students as whole persons, not just intellectually. Eventually, though, I felt called to leave academia and enter the ministry. I wanted to share the spiritual truths I had learned and help others connect with God. How did your academic colleagues react to your transformation? Many were skeptical, to say the least. Some thought I had lost my mind or was having some kind of breakdown. Others were curious and wanted to understand more about what had happened to me. It wasn't easy, but I learned to be patient with their doubts and questions, remembering that I too had once been a skeptic. You mentioned earlier that you received a lot of information from Jesus during your experience. Can you elaborate on some of the other things he told you? One of the most significant things was about the nature of reality. Jesus explained that what we perceive as the physical universe is actually a kind of illusion or projection. The true reality is spiritual, and our physical existence is more like a temporary classroom or testing ground for our souls. That's a profound concept. Did he explain why we have this physical existence? Yes, he said that we're here to learn and grow spiritually. Each life is an opportunity to develop our capacity for love, compassion, and wisdom. The challenges and suffering we face are not punishments, but opportunities for growth. Even the most difficult experiences can serve a higher purpose in our spiritual evolution. Did Jesus say anything about other religions or spiritual paths? He showed me that there is truth in all sincere spiritual paths, but that many religions have also accumulated human distortions and misunderstandings over time. The core truth is always love for God, for each other, and for all creation. Any teaching that promotes genuine love and compassion is in alignment with divine will. What did you learn about the afterlife? I saw that there are many levels or dimensions in the spiritual world. Where we go after death depends on our spiritual development and the choices we've made. Some people who are very attached to earthly things or harboring a lot of negativity might stay close to the physical plane for a while. Others who are more spiritually evolved move on to higher, more beautiful realms. Did Jesus explain the purpose of these different realms? Yes, he showed me that each level serves as a kind of school or training ground. Souls can progress through these levels as they learn and grow. The ultimate goal is to return to full union with God, but this is a journey that can take many lifetimes. You mentioned earlier about intelligent life in the universe. Can you elaborate on that? Jesus showed me that the universe is teeming with life, much of it far more advanced than humanity. There are countless civilizations on other planets and in other dimensions. Many of these beings are deeply spiritual and have a much clearer understanding of cosmic realities than we do. Some of these beings are so different from us that we might not even recognize them as life forms. Others are more similar to us but at various stages of development. Did he say if these beings ever interact with Earth? Yes, he indicated that there is more interaction than most people realize. Some highly evolved beings serve as guides or guardians for humanity, helping to nudge our development in positive directions. However, they respect our free will and don't interfere directly in our affairs unless absolutely necessary. Also, many of these civilizations exist in dimensions or states of being that we can't perceive with our limited senses and technology. That's fascinating. Did Jesus share any information about the future of humanity? He showed me that humanity is in a crucial phase of development. We're at a tipping point where we need to evolve spiritually or risk destroying ourselves. The challenges we face, environmental destruction, war, inequality, are all symptoms of our collective spiritual immaturity. But he also showed me that there's hope. More and more people are awakening to spiritual realities and our interconnectedness. Did he give any specific predictions about future events? He didn't give me a detailed timeline of future events. Instead, he emphasized that the future is not set in stone. Our collective choices shape the future, and even small acts of love and kindness can have far-reaching effects. He did indicate that humanity will face increasing challenges that will force us to either come together and evolve, or face dire consequences. How did this experience affect your understanding of time? Jesus showed me that time as we understand it is also an illusion of the physical realm. In the spiritual dimensions, past, present, and future exist simultaneously. This is why during life reviews, souls can see the consequences of their actions playing out. It's all happening in an eternal now. That's a mind-bending concept. Did you gain any insights about the nature of consciousness? Yes, I learned that consciousness is fundamental to the universe. It's not produced by the brain, as I used to believe as a materialist. Instead, the brain is more like a receiver that filters and focuses consciousness. Our true self, our soul, is pure consciousness and is eternal. Did Jesus explain why we don't remember our spiritual nature when we're born? He showed me that the veil of forgetfulness serves an important purpose. If we remembered everything, we wouldn't have the same opportunities for growth and learning. The challenges of physical life, including the illusion of separation from God, provide a unique environment for spiritual development. You've mentioned that some of the information you received has been controversial. Can you give us another example? One topic that has caused some controversy is what I learned about reincarnation. Jesus showed me that many souls do have multiple lives on Earth, but it's not a simple, linear process as some Eastern philosophies teach. It's much more complex, with souls sometimes splitting or merging, and time doesn't work the same way in the spiritual realm as it does here. How do you reconcile this with traditional Christian teachings? It's been a challenge, to be honest. I've had to accept that many of our religious doctrines are simplified versions of much more complex spiritual truths. Jesus emphasized to me that love and compassion are far more important than dogma or theology. He wants us to focus on loving each other and growing spiritually, not arguing over doctrinal details. Let's talk about the life review process in more detail. How comprehensive was it? It was incredibly thorough. We reviewed not just major events, but seemingly insignificant interactions as well. I saw how a small act of kindness could have a ripple effect, positively impacting many lives. Conversely, I also saw how moments of selfishness or cruelty caused pain that spread far beyond the initial interaction. Were you judged harshly for your mistakes? No, that's the amazing thing. There was no sense of judgment or punishment from Jesus or the angels. They felt sad when they saw my failures, but it was a sadness born of love and disappointment, not anger. The harshest judge was myself. Seeing my life from this higher perspective, I felt deep remorse for the times I had failed to love others. Did you see how your actions affected people beyond your immediate interactions? Absolutely. It was like seeing ripples in a pond, but extending out infinitely. I saw how my actions and words influenced people, who then influenced others, creating chains of cause and effect that I had never imagined. It gave me a profound sense of the interconnectedness of all humanity and the responsibility we bear for our choices. Did you also see positive impacts you had made that you weren't aware of? Yes, and those were beautiful moments in the life review. I saw times when a word of encouragement or a small act of kindness had a huge positive impact on someone's life. Sometimes these were people I barely remembered interacting with. It showed me that every interaction, no matter how brief, is an opportunity to spread love and positivity. How did this life review process change your approach to daily life after you returned? It made me much more mindful of my interactions with others. I became acutely aware that every word, every gesture, every decision could have far-reaching consequences. It inspired me to try to approach each interaction with love and mindfulness, to always try to lift others up rather than tear them down. You've mentioned that Jesus communicated with you telepathically. Can you describe that experience in more detail? It was unlike any communication I've experienced on Earth. It was instantaneous and complete. In a single moment, I could receive complex ideas, emotions, and even visual information. It wasn't just words or thoughts, but a full, multidimensional understanding. It made our earthly methods of communication seem incredibly slow and limited by comparison. Did you have any difficulty understanding or processing this form of communication? Surprisingly, no. While I was in that spiritual state, it felt completely natural. It was only after I returned to my physical body that I struggled to translate those experiences into words and concepts that could be understood in our normal state of consciousness. You've said that Jesus has a sense of humor. Can you give us an example of that? Yes, his humor was one of the most unexpected and delightful aspects of our interaction. For instance, when I realized he could read all my thoughts and became embarrassed about some of the things I had thought about in life, he laughed. He found my embarrassment amusing and endearing. His laughter was full of love and acceptance, not mockery. How did experiencing this divine love and acceptance affect you? It was transformative. For the first time, I understood what unconditional love truly means. It's not just an absence of judgment, but a complete acceptance and delight in who you are, flaws and all. Experiencing that level of love and acceptance healed deep wounds in my psyche that I didn't even know I had. Did this experience change your understanding of the nature of God? Profoundly. Before, on the rare occasions I had thought about God, I imagined a stern, judgmental figure. But the God I encountered through Jesus was overflowing with love, compassion, and even joy. There was a sense of playfulness and delight that I had never associated with the divine before. You've mentioned that you were shown other realms or dimensions. Can you describe what you saw? It's challenging to describe in earthly terms, but I'll try. I saw realms of incredible beauty, with colors that don't exist on Earth and landscapes that defied physical laws as we know them. There were also realms that seemed to be made of pure thought or emotion. In some, I saw beings of light engaged in what seemed to be joyful creative activities. Were you shown any darker realms? Yes, I was also aware of lower vibrational realms, which some might call hell. But it's important to understand that these aren't places of eternal punishment. They're more like stages of purification that souls pass through. The suffering there is self-imposed, a result of the soul's own negative thoughts and actions. How does this concept of hell differ from traditional religious teachings? The key difference is that it's not a place of eternal torment imposed by God. It's a temporary state that souls experience as part of their growth and purification. God's love extends even to these realms, and all souls eventually find their way back to the light. It's a much more hopeful and loving vision than the traditional concept of hell. Did Jesus explain why there's suffering in the world if God is all-loving? Yes, this was one of the big questions I had. Jesus explained that suffering serves a purpose in our spiritual growth. It's not punishment, but rather an opportunity for learning and development. The challenges we face in life are tailored to help us grow in the areas where we need it most. However, he also emphasized that we're meant to help alleviate each other's suffering through love and compassion. Did Jesus share any insights about the future of humanity? He showed me that humanity is on a long journey of spiritual evolution. We're gradually awakening to our true nature as spiritual beings and to our interconnectedness with all life. However, this process involves challenges and growing pains, which explains much of the turmoil we see in the world. Ultimately, though, humanity will evolve into a much more loving, peaceful, and spiritually aware state. Did he give any time frame for this evolution? No specific time frame was given. Jesus emphasized that from the perspective of eternity, our earthly concept of time is very limited. What might seem like a long, slow process to us is just a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of things. The important thing is for each of us to focus on our own spiritual growth and on spreading love in our own spheres of influence. You've mentioned that you were shown the interconnectedness of all life. Can you elaborate on that? Yes, it was a profound revelation. I saw that at the deepest level, all life, indeed, all of creation, is interconnected. We're not separate beings, but rather individuated expressions of a unified consciousness. This understanding transcends our usual notions of self and other, and even of life and non-life. Everything in the universe, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galaxy, is part of this interconnected web of being. How has this understanding affected your daily life? It's given me a much greater sense of responsibility for my thoughts and actions, knowing that they affect the whole. It's also deepened my sense of compassion for others, as I understand that their suffering is, in a very real sense, my suffering too. And it's given me a profound respect for all of nature, seeing it as an expression of the same divine consciousness that I am. Did Jesus give you any specific messages or instructions to share with others? The overarching message was about the primacy of love. He emphasized repeatedly that love is the most powerful force in the universe and that our primary purpose is to learn to love more fully and completely. He also stressed the importance of forgiveness, both of others and of ourselves. And he encouraged us to trust in the divine plan, even when we can't understand it from our limited earthly perspective. How did your experience affect your understanding of other religions? It gave me a much more inclusive and universal perspective. I saw that all genuine spiritual paths are leading to the same ultimate truth, just expressing it in different ways. The differences between religions seemed much less important than their common core of love and compassion. Jesus showed me that he works through all sincere seekers, regardless of their religious label. That's a very different view from many traditional Christian teachings. How do you reconcile this with your role as a Christian minister? It's been a journey of understanding and integration. I've come to see that the essence of Jesus' teachings is about love, not about creating divisions or claiming exclusive truth. In my ministry, I focus on these core spiritual truths and the practical application of love in daily life, rather than on doctrinal differences. I encourage people to seek their own direct connection with the divine, while still honoring the wisdom and beauty in Christian traditions. Have you had any ongoing spiritual experiences since your return? Yes, though not as dramatic as the near-death experience. I've developed a much greater sensitivity to spiritual realities. I often sense the presence of spiritual beings or receive intuitive guidance. I've also had some profound meditation experiences that have reinforced and expanded upon what I learned during my near-death experience. How do you respond to scientific explanations that attribute near-death experiences to brain chemistry? I respect scientific inquiry and believe it has an important role in understanding our world. However, I also believe that science, as it's currently practiced, is limited in its ability to fully explain spiritual experiences. The depth, coherence, and transformative power of my experience go far beyond what can be explained by simple brain chemistry. Moreover, the verifiable information I received, which I had no way of knowing otherwise, suggests that something more than just brain activity was involved. Did you learn anything about the purpose of suffering? This was one of the hardest things for me to understand, but Jesus showed me that suffering often serves as a catalyst for growth. It can break open our hearts and make us more compassionate. It can also push us to question our assumptions and seek deeper truths. However, he also made it clear that not all suffering is necessary or divinely ordained. Much of the suffering in the world is the result of human choices and can be alleviated through love and compassion. That's a profound perspective. Did you gain any insights about healing? Yes, I saw that true healing involves more than just the physical body. It encompasses emotional, mental, and spiritual healing as well. I learned that many physical ailments have roots in unresolved emotional or spiritual issues. Jesus showed me that love is the most powerful healing force in the universe. Interviewer, did you gain any insights about the nature of free will? Howard, free will is a fundamental aspect of our existence. God respects our free will so much that we're even allowed to reject divine love if we choose. However, I also saw that many of our choices are influenced by past experiences, cultural conditioning, and spiritual factors we're not consciously aware of. True free will comes from aligning with our higher self and making choices from a place of love and wisdom. Interviewer, that's a nuanced view. Did Jesus share any wisdom about how to make better choices? Howard, he emphasized the importance of quieting the mind and listening to our inner guidance. When we're aligned with our higher self, we naturally make choices that are in harmony with divine will. He also stressed the importance of considering the long-term consequences of our actions, not just immediate gratification. Interviewer, did you learn anything about the power of prayer or intention? Howard, I saw that prayer and focused intention can have a real impact on the world. When we pray or send loving thoughts to others, it creates ripples in the spiritual realm that can manifest in the physical world. However, the most powerful prayers are those aligned with divine love and wisdom, not just our personal desires. As we wrap up this interview, what final thoughts would you like to share with our audience? I would encourage everyone to be open to the possibility of a greater reality beyond what we can see and touch. Whether you have a dramatic experience like mine or not, I believe we all have access to divine love and guidance if we're willing to seek it. Remember that the most important thing in life is how we treat each other. Every interaction is an opportunity to express love, to grow, and to help others grow. Don't wait for a near-death experience to realize this. Start living with love and purpose today. And finally, don't be afraid of death. What awaits us is more beautiful than we can imagine. But that doesn't mean we should rush towards it. We're here in this physical life for a reason, to learn and grow. Embrace your life, with all its joys and challenges, knowing that it's all part of a greater journey. Thank you, Howard, for sharing your extraordinary story and insights with us. Your experience offers a unique perspective on life, death, and the nature of reality itself. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. I hope it brings comfort, hope, and perhaps a new perspective to those who hear it. Remember, we are all on this journey together, and we are all loved more than we can possibly imagine.